They're doing things like electroconvulsive therapy on people. They're trying to hypnotize them. They're using sensory deprivation, sexual abuse, mental abuse. Welcome back to another episode of Shrink Space. I am David Colarosi, and this is Rob Patterson.
Hello, hello.
How are you? Rob, sorry to jump in here. This podcast is going to change your life.
I highly doubt that, but I am eager to see what you have in store for me.
Well, let me just say this, that the last 2 days I have been down every rabbit hole, every conspiracy theory, and I feel like I am more than is typical, sort of elevated in my understanding of how the world works.
So that was what I was thinking of as you were saying that. I was trying to come up with a witty response, like, well, what is different about today or the past 2 days? Because I feel like that's where you generally tend to fall anyway.
With elevated thinking, I agree.
Oh,
yeah, I got you.
Yes,
I understand.
Elevated thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not that constant kind of twitch that you have that is always related to the anxieties and conspiracy theories that you tend to subscribe to. But yeah,
yes.
Go ahead.
And that's what this podcast. Let me just tell a little bit of a story here, okay? Did you know that our past president, Donald Trump, there was an assassination attempt on his life?
I have heard.
Okay. So I've been the director of security has Kimberly Cheadle has
our director of the Secret Service. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, of Secret Service. I've been a little bit deep into, not so focused on the actual details, mostly in the conspiracies. Okay,
as any good conspiracy theorist is, not too focused on the details.
Right.
I want to interrupt you for a second here. I feel like this is going to be a very uneven playing field. This would be, for example, you have made fun of me in the past for my strong level of interest in maps and cartography.
Yes.
I feel like this is your maps or cartography. It's like I could talk about lakes and rivers and mountains and geographic, boundaries for days, and you would just sit there and be like, all right, I feel like we're in your, like, you're an expert in this if one exists.
This is my playground.
I'm anxious to hear how I'm able to contribute here.
Well, let me just say that I appreciate you thinking that, but when I said Kimberly Cheadle, the director of, and then I was like, oh shit, what's the title?
Right. Details. The details don't matter.
So hold on the expertise piece, but I saw her get just absolutely annihilated by Congress because of all of the gaps, right?
And I heard it was kind of across the board. It wasn't a more partisan ribbing. It was kind of across the board ribbing.
Nobody seems to be very impressed with her or the Secret Service's performance on that day.
And
yeah, so we are
representative.
We are unified in our frustration by their performance. So there's a lot of things that happened, right? Like the shooter shows up and he's walking around the grounds with a ladder and a rifle. No one seems to have a problem with it. They knew there was calls going in. I mean, we know all of the reasons why this is crazy that this happened, right? He's sitting on a roof that is not that sloped. It's sloped at a less degree than a ADA ramp for a wheelchair. And Kimberly's initial response was, well, it was too sloped for us to put one of our guys on there because it was dangerous for them. All kinds of weird, he threw up a drone ahead of time. There was no one caught that or stopped it. It was just like a total nightmare. It was a security disaster. Sure. And of course, there are all kinds of theories online about like what's really happening. Did you know, Rob, this one really just got me percolating, okay? This was the first time of the entire campaign season that CNN has live streamed one of Trump's rallies. CNN never, all the news, the left-leaning news never attends a rally and never promotes it, right? They're trying to stifle Trump. This time, they live streamed it.
Whoa.
Boom.
Whoa.
Right? Okay.
Whoa.
Now, it's also possible that, Trump really doesn't seem to have an injury. Maybe it was faked. Maybe Trump planned it to elevate himself as a hero.
Whoa.
Boom, right? Okay,
Whoa.
so I have been I think one of our very first conversations when I really knew that you and I operated at different sort of intellectual levels was when there was the Las Vegas shooting. Do you remember this? And I said, "Rob,
You'll have to be more. What are you talking about? Which one?
it was like a country music
Ah,
fair
yeah. There's something like up
show.
in a hotel. Okay.
Guys and he shoots like 55 people. It's a
Right.
huge massacre, and you just go, yeah, some guy snuck into a hotel room with an absolute arsenal. He broke out one of the windows. No one in the hotel did anything. They couldn't figure out where he was, and you just go, "There's one shooter. This just happens." And I go, "No, no, no. There's shooters everywhere, buddy. And this is intentional. This is right. You remember?" And you were
I
like,
vaguely remember you having a lot a lot of information for those who
"Yeah,
can't see me.
yeah.
I just put up some air quotes there as to why there might be some alternative theories.
There's a lot of things you got to look into, Rob." Okay.
Apparently,
So anyway, so this got me thinking about conspiracy. So the today's topic. So for the format of this podcast is each day or each podcast rather, one of us will do research into a topic and present that research, and then we'll discuss it. Today, I think that the depth and the detail of the research is going to be overwhelming. So I want to say this is a really important. Everybody should be. You might want to listen to this in half speed, really, to be able to digest all of the content that I'm going to share today.
the other thing we generally say is, as psychologists, we recognize that what we do for a living can oftentimes um, cause people to want to look to seek advice from us. But this is purely for what we're doing here is purely for entertainment. I can't imagine a better episode for me to reiterate this is only for entertainment purposes
Yes.
than whatever twisted path you and I are going to go down today. So let's do it. Let's do it.
I think let me also say I recognize that I'm full of shit. Okay, so I just want before I lose every client that I ever worked with, I understand that I understand it's fun to go down the rabbit hole, but
It is fun. It is fun to go down the rabbit hole
I am sane. All right, I don't have a tinfoil hat, not on camera anyway,
visibly.
visibly. Okay, so here's the first thing. So I was looking at is do you know, like if I said to you, because I was thinking, okay, well, what are the reasons why these conspiracy theories abound? And we'll talk today about like the psychological purpose, like what leads someone to buy in, what leads one person to buy into a conspiracy versus another person. But I was thinking part of it is there is an incredible, like the landscape right now, the political landscape right now is one which we do not believe anything that our authorities, whether it's authorities in the media or if it's authorities in the government, we don't believe anything that anybody in that's in an authority figure tells us. Whether it's in medicine, we don't believe any of it. And then
Yeah,
I
that
go, okay, well,
yeah, it's similar
why?
to what we were talking about. I think on another episode, which is kind of belief and trust in institutions. It continues to decrease, and over the past couple of years, have hit some all time lows.
Yes. And the number one, so I looked up like what's the number one reason why people don't believe in institutions? And the number one explanation that I could find online is there's a lot of misinformation, which is
Yeah,
exactly what our lizard overlords would tell us. It's
that's
because there's
exactly what they would
all this
say.
information, but the reality is that there are conspiracies that have absolutely been proven accurate.
Okay,
Have you ever heard of
could
MK Ultra?
no,
I hadn't heard about it until I was like preparing for this podcast. I have a lot of research to do. But in short, MK Ultra was a program run by the CIA from roughly, I think it was 1953 through 1977, where we were trying to figure out how we could do mind control. This wasn't like academic sanctioned
hmm.
research. There was no IRB protecting people. This was the
Yeah,
government. sending. I mean, they had all different strategies to do this, but they're trying to figure out how do we influence the way people think and behave, whether or not uh, it's reasonable or even whether or not we're going to damage these people. So they are doing things like sending out sex workers to recruit men to abandon houses and then taking them and dosing them with LSD until they go into a coma. They're doing things like electroconvulsive therapy on people. They're trying to hypnotize them. They're using sensory deprivation, sexual abuse, mental abuse, like horrific stuff. And this all, if you look it up, this is not like, gee, is this real or is this not real? They declassified, I think in the late 70s, they declassified 20,000 documents. My numbers might be off, but I believe it was 20,000 documents outlining what this program was. Like, no, this is not like, oh, David's a loon. This is like, it's out there.
And I can appreciate that. I mean, I think when I hear conspiracy theories, and maybe when some other people do as well, right? It can be a bit crackpot sounding. Like, all
Yes.
right. But yeah, I think there are certainly have been, especially as I think of governments, including our own, particularly in the past, because they used to be conspiracy theories, maybe, and then through declassification or whatever else, they have come to be true. I think of, I don't know if this was ever a conspiracy theory, but just some of the things that we did with governments in like Central and South America in the 50s, 60s, 70s in the name of preventing communism from spreading. I was actually just watching, I think this comes to mind, I was watching this show on Apple TV. It's called Omnivore or something. And they just talk about different foods that have sustained people and their importance in different cultures. And they were talking about the history of banana agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And how, one type of banana out of the thousands that exist became the dominant banana that you and I and anyone else who eats bananas probably eats.
Yeah.
And how, in an effort to maintain a grasp on that market, the U.S. government would intervene in different Central American countries, not just to maintain the banana market for an American company, but certainly in part to maintain the banana market for an American company. And I think if, most people would have heard that in the U.S. in the 60s or 70s, people would have said, all right,
Yeah.
everyone needs to settle down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
So, I
real.
mean, you're right. This happens.
Okay. Hold on. I'm just getting warmed up. I'm going to spend about 45 minutes going through all of my conspiracies.
Oh my
I'll
God. I think
I'll get,
I think literally everyone who is listening, not everyone, the three people who are like you have stayed on. No one else is currently listening.
just hold on. You get everybody get their thumbs ready to Google this, to look this up on TikTok. Okay. Hold on.
Oh, there you go.
M,
When you want information about
M,
conspiracy theories, where do you go? You go to
all right.
TikTok.
2018, the Cambridge
Cambridge
Analytical
Analytica.
scandal. What? Analytica? What's that?
Yeah, isn't it called Cambridge Analytica?
I don't. All I know is
Doesn't matter.
our boy Mark Zuckerberg was caught selling data to political entities to help influence our elections. Caught? No, does not. Did he not? Absolutely. Facebook took our personal information and sold it so that people could use it when they were marketing for the election. Then we have
Colin,
in
can I
20.
stop you right there?
Yes.
Is that a conspiracy theory?
I think there was a debate before whether or not Facebook was actually was trying to influence our elections. And now we all agree. At the time, there were people thinking that the lizard people were running things and selling our information for this purpose, but there was a debate, there was a conspiracy around that, and then it was proven correct.
Okay. So,
Go ahead.
Okay, I got it. Go ahead. Continue.
I'm just making the argument here that there
Mhm.
is a reason not to trust our authorities in the government, our authorities in the media. So the other ones here are in 2020. Remember the UFO data became declassified. We were all like, okay, some crackpot believes in UFOs. Then they release classified documents and videos, and sure enough, There have been multiple events of UFOs that the government has tracked and just has hidden. Epstein. There was lots of Alex Jones been screaming about Epstein and his island and network of sexual abuse. All of a sudden, it comes true. Snowden, NSA, monitoring everybody domestically and internationally. No one thought it was a crazy theory. All of a sudden, it's true. So my point is that if you're a conspiracy theorist, the part of the landscape is you really can't. These are just things that have been declassified, so we know that the conspiracy theory was true. But
Hmm.
how many things are we not looped in on that you know are viable and we wouldn't have thought so?
Right. And then maybe even the broader question, why is this why is thinking about this type of stuff interesting, particularly to a certain group of people? Like
You
why
mean
do some people like you really get into this?
you
And
mean
then
the
some people
elevated?
like me are like, I can't possibly
So
find much interest in this.
so I looked it up. Are people that believe in conspiracy theories smarter than people that don't?
Hmm.
There wasn't a lot of data that supported that perspective.
That makes sense.
Sadly, but I cannot tell you how I would have loved to come here and
I can
say,
only
"Oh yeah,
imagine the fact
oh
that you searched that in the first place
oh yeah,
is very
yeah." But
indicative of what
I'm
you're
very
hoping to find.
I'm very disappointed in how it turned out. So the number one, the there's a range of reasons, but one of the big reasons why it's appealing to everybody. So we'll talk like the fringe people why they get into it in a second here, but the reason why it is valuable to have a conspiracy theory, like psychologically for everybody, is that it brings clarity to ambiguity. We as humans are very uncomfortable with chaos. When we can't understand things, we like psychologically want to bring order to it and we want to patternize everything. And
Right.
so
The
to say,
ambiguity and lack of information
yes,
is anxiety provoking, and so we need to make meaning out of things that may not really have much meaning at all.
yes. So COVID, I think, is a great example of this because people sort of, the aisle sort of split, and some people were going, it is, we need to believe in medicine. And this is,
Right.
absolutely just been, came from animals and we need to trust that. And other people go, it's a lab leak and we are overreacting, keep the business. We sort of split, but both sides were equally invested in knowing the answer. Very few people during
Mhm.
COVID were like, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm gonna have to just sort of struggle with the anxiety there. What we all want to do psychologically is go, this is exactly what it is. And I know that my strategy for solving that is the best strategy. There's a concept in psychology called naive realism.
Mhm.
Have you heard of that? That the idea that you believe your view, but more than that, you think that your view is right, and anybody else that disagrees with your view is stupid.
Right.
Which I think is like an interesting psychological mechanism to go, I am so right that I am right. I am typically ethical, and you are morally bankrupt and dumb to believe anything that is in opposition to my view.
Right. I would frame that. I would bucket that into just one of those theories about people where, in order to go on with our day, we have to think just to protect our own egos, right? We have to think that we're right, we're well intentioned, that we're ethical, right? That's just
Mhm,
one of those. And then this naive realism is just another example of how we reinforce that in our own heads so that we can get on with our day.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
I think, yeah, there's a couple of those types of concepts that I think are all kind of fall in that same bucket. What's the other one I'm thinking of right now where, um, like, not attribution theory.
Confirmation bias?
No, it's God, I can't think of it now. But it's essentially like, when I drive the car and you cut me off, you're the bad driver.
Yeah, attribution
When
error.
I'm driving, yeah, something like that. Yeah, fundamental
Attribution
attribution error. That's
Oh,
it.
fundamental
But when I
attribution error,
cut,
yes.
yeah, but when I cut someone off, it's I didn't see it, or there's something about the
Yeah, there's a
situation. Like it's not my fault. I'm not a bad driver. But when you do
yeah,
it, you're a bad driver.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
So it kind of has that same feel to it.
Yes. So we all need that, but for some people, there's no I guess the question for you, why do you think for some people you default to, I'm going to trust this entity which has been proven to lie to me? Like, we all agree, maybe we don't all agree. I would argue, because I just gave a bunch of examples, the government will lie to you. The people in power will lie to you. And yet the majority of our population will listen to them and go, it's probably right. Why do we default to that view versus why are we not all like, hey, buddy, you've been lying. You lie constantly. Why is
So
our
I think,
default not to
yeah,
question?
I think two things there. One is, you know, is the government or any other institution like that, are they always lying? So
You never know. They don't declassify everything.
correct. But I guess that wasn't really a question. It was a statement formed in a
Yeah.
question. They're not always lying.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, where you do see this with some institutions that you can choose to be a member of or not, like religious institutions. If you no longer believe the tenets of your religious institution that you grew up in, you can elect to leave it. But
Mm-hmm.
with things like governments, I guess you could decide, I am, going to live off the grid in the forest somewhere, or I'm going to move to another country or something that maybe more aligns with what my values are, or is more honest, or whatever it is. But I feel like the other question there is, well, what's the alternative? Like, if I think that the government's lying to me, then that doesn't make me feel great. If I think they're always lying, and so what do I do about it? Do I just never trust them and I go through life like a tinfoil hat person, or do I try to make myself feel better by saying, I don't think they're always lying to me?
Yeah. What is the
Like, I think
there's
just
a
makes people feel better to think that that's not the case. And I think it's true. I may be naive, but I personally think it's true that they're not lying about it. I mean, no institution is lying about everything all the time.
I have such a negative reaction to what you're saying. I just can't think of what the name is. There's like people on the internet was like, "Oh, that's a blue pill or that's a red pill from Matrix." I can't remember
Yeah.
what it is, but you are blue pilling it. I think where you're like,
What?
in the Matrix when
Yes.
Lawrence
He's offered
Fishburne,
two different pills.
yes, and one of them is like, "Do you want to know what's actually happening, or you just want to go through like a lemming?" And you're being like, we'll just do the blue pill. Like I'm just going to be a lemming and just not think and not push back on the machine.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I can see why you think that. I say I think for people like you, it's more exciting to think about all this. It's
Yes.
a dopamine hit.
Y- yes. So
And to
yeah.
think through all the potential alternatives. And for someone like me, at times it is. And at times I'm just like, I don't care to know. But I'm also kind of conflict avoidant, so that makes sense a little bit.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if there's what if there's an interaction with conflict avoidant personality
I would say
and
so. I mean, I'm more of a rule
receptiveness.
follower than you are.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
bet there's part of it in there too.
Yes. All right. So if you're listening to this right now, you're probably thinking David's look how elevated David's thinking is. I'm so impressed. But you should leave in the comments whether or not you are red pill like David or if you're blue pill like Rob. And the blue pill should come with some shame. Okay.
No,
All
you're just realists who get on with their days and can't be bothered to think about all this shit all the time.
right.
You have
Okay.
other more important
All
things to
right.
think about instead of
Okay.
someone like David who's on his phone at 3 o'clock in the morning under his sheets, scrolling through the black hole that is the internet, trying to find different things to
Y-
get upset about.
yes. All right, so there are a lot of reasons. There's a lot. Like a fair bit of research on why somebody's attracted to it, and you're right. Like one part of it is there is there's a sense of empowerment that comes from a dopamine hit that comes from feeling like you figured things out.
Hmm.
And so the research would say that most people that are into conspiracies. Now, there's a spectrum of conspiracy
Sure.
theorists. One person thinks, I don't think that Epstein really killed himself, and you could argue, or I don't think that that the COVID virus, I think the COVID virus was leaked from a lab, right? That would be more mainstream conspiracy theory versus the other one is, we are the lizard people run us, right? And
Hmm.
it's a very extreme, right? So it's hard to sort of bucket conspiracy theorists all into one category, but in general, there is most people that are really into this are feel disenfranchised. There's a sense not just that they are not successful or disempowered, but that they ought to be successful and empowered. There's like a tension between my
Okay.
perceived station in life and how I'm actually performing.
Yeah.
Someone who's just not performing, someone who has a perceived low station in life and thinks they deserve it, less likely to be a conspiracy theorist. But if you
Right.
think you're struggling, but you have all the skills, and if people just recognized your skill or talent or whatever, you're more likely to be a conspiracy theorist.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And it also, I would say, I mean, right? There's always been conspiracy theorists. There's just now more opportunity for people to share what their
Hmm.
theories are and commune
Hmm.
or, you know, connect
Yes.
and talk about it than there's ever been.
Yes. So that's the next
But
piece of it. So
oh, go
one
ahead.
so one- sorry. So one piece of it is I feel there's a dopamine hit from like being in the know. The next piece of it is because my life is not like the believed mechanism behind this is because my life is not going well. I feel like I am sort of unmoored, paddling with I can't get any traction. But this conspiracy, the expertise there psychologically gives me a sense of control. I know what the media. I know why CNN live streamed that assassination attempt. I know exactly what happened with Epstein, and the fact that you think you know something that nobody else knows gives you there's a perception of control, and that serves that population more. Right? That maybe serves my personality more than it serves your personality. If I feel like I am disenfranchised, does that make sense?
It, the control part, I would think it would make me feel special or like I'm in on something that, none of you dumbasses out there are actually in on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so the
Mm-hmm.
control part, I wouldn't have said control. I guess I would have thought it makes me feel special or it makes
Uh
me
huh.
feel smarter.
Yes, which is I would say is also a function of it. So that you already sort of pointed to it. The next thing is because if you and I have this same belief system, I also like I'm being told that I'm really smart because I figured this thing out, and I am able to divide the world into in group, out group really
Yeah.
easily, especially with social media. We all know it, and you guys are all back to that naive realism. You guys are all really stupid because you don't track it.
Yeah. And so it ironically gives a sense of community then to
Yes,
maybe people
yes,
who don't feel like they have a lot of other options for that community.
yes.
Okay.
And there's interesting like case studies on people that are 9/11 truthers, and then they're
Okay. Yeah, like it was an
given
inside job or something like
inside
that.
job, yeah, and then they're given data that feels irrefutable, and then it is a major like psychological stress to exit out of that social group. Like
Yeah.
everybody that everybody you connect with views this event in one way, and you lose. Not only do you lose all of your relationships, but you lose your entire identity as this person who
Yeah.
understands the world, as this person that has this specialized, level of expertise, as this person who's, not going to be, controlled by the authorities or the powers that be. Um, so it's really hard when someone goes down that path to get them out of it. Like we're not good thinkers once we are locked in on a conspiracy.
It I'm over here thinking, like, as you're talking, it just makes me think of people who were, when I've read or listened to interviews of people who were in like a cult or some very kind of fringe religious sect,
Uh-huh.
and they talk about just being part of it, and then when they make the choice to leave,
Uh-huh.
how difficult it is, how ostracized they feel.
Yes.
And not that it's the same thing, but again, it's oftentimes I feel like for people it always comes back to a need to belong.
Mhm.
Everyone has a need to belong, and potentially people who really dive deep into more extreme conspiracy theories may
Mhm.
in part do so because of that need to belong, especially now when they can find other people who might believe
Yeah.
what they believe.
Yeah. Which is also, intuitively, part of this, which is that it's really easy to, with the internet, to confirm all of your
Yeah.
biases,
Yeah.
right? Like to me, the idea like this, let's just use the Trump assassination attempt. The idea that the Republicans coordinated that it's hard for me even to like, even for fun to go down that path
Right.
because it seems really high
Is that one
risk
of
to
the
have someone.
conspiracy theories?
Yeah. Yeah, because
Okay.
he got a major uptick in approval after that. He got
Oh,
up
they
and
did it to
le
help him, not to take him
y
out. Oh,
right,
okay.
Trump hired the guy, said, "I know you're a good shot, just shoot my ear, and then I'm gonna get up," and, like, why did the New York Times, um, camera guy, how did he know he'd get that shot where Trump stood up with blood on his face? Like, that was really perfect. The flag was in the background. Was this all coordinated in an effort to really create this perfect photo that would then, you know, move Trump to the front of it, right? You could, but I think what happens is if you look that up, you find it's easy to confirm your bias by getting little snippets of data that support whatever your view is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, do you think the through line is psychological stability? Like if you lack psychological stability, are you going to be more attracted to conspiracy theories?
I mean, psychological stability, like, are you like, what do you mean by psychological stability?
I think I mean if you are ground there's a level of so someone like, I mean, I know that I'm sort of like trying to position myself way outside of you. But when we talk about
Right, right, right.
the collective you of people that
Sure.
believe the government, right? You're having to tolerate a lot of ambiguity, a lot of unknown. You're having to trust someone who has shown not to always be
Correct.
trustworthy, and that causes distress. It must cause distress because you don't know all of the information. But for you, you go, I can tolerate that level of ambiguity. What's for lunch? Moving on.
Mhm.
And I wonder, is that a sense of because you're grounded, because you know who you are, because you're not dealing with distress about your career or your position in life, do you then just whatever move on? Versus does somebody who is less comfortable psychologically with who they are, like does that extra agitation, the ambiguity, lead them to look for, you know, certainty in increased ambiguity, which is what's wild to me, right? Essentially, what I've been saying to you is like describing this from a psychological standpoint is this big event happens. And because I don't want to agree with the government, I am looking on YouTube and TikTok and
Right?
God
Yeah.
knows what, Joe Blow, who, you know, was going to the bathroom and posting a theory on Reddit. I'm going to listen to that versus, right. And I'm going to believe that wholeheartedly, which objectively, isn't there more ambiguity with the Reddit theory than what you're getting from the government?
Yeah. So if stability that way, I could see that. Did you find anything? So we were talking about, just kind of managing anxieties earlier. My thought here is that the more anxious you are, the more likely you are to believe in some of this stuff because it's a way, again, to make meaning out of something. And so maybe if you're
Yeah.
more anxious or suffer from anxiety, yeah, I
Yes.
wonder if there's a relationship there.
I think so. I mean, I think that there's a couple things. So it changes the perceived locus of control.
Right.
And like
Like
just
you're in control. Yeah.
feeling like something makes you feel like you're in control.
Hmm.
Having an in group that you can align with and then hate the enemy also gives
Yep.
you a sense of stability.
Yep.
It reduces your level. There's a thing called proportionality bias, which essentially says that if you have a catastrophic event happen, psychologically, we want the trigger for that psychological event to be equally significant. So, for example, if with the COVID virus is the good example. Uh, Initially, they were saying it came out of Wuhan, but it was because somebody ate you know whatever.
Bat.
There was a bat was in the soup,
Yeah.
which is like somebody ate a bat, and now whatever it is,
Yeah.
millions of people are dying. It feels like the proportionality doesn't fit. So our default is to go, this must have been intentional, and the leaders of the world, the elite leaders of the world, have purposely created this virus and then leaked this virus. Right? That's a more that fits the proportion of the COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody shoots, like let's just say Trump had been killed. That's a massive event. The
Yeah.
idea that just some incel crawled on the roof and shot him is hard to like. Just wait a second.
Yeah.
This little thing happened, and then now one of our leaders is gone. It's much
It
better
has to
to
be more complex
it's
than that.
digestible to think no. Lots of people are involved. It's a big
Yeah.
thing.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think
So
that
I've
adds,
not thought about it that way before.
yeah, it's an
That makes
interesting,
sense.
yeah. Um,
Um, this reminds me. Have you and I talked about the show Silo that I just binge watched?
I have not seen. I know you're watching it, but I've not seen it.
Okay, so I binge watched it.
Hmm.
For anyone who's into uh, kind of quasi sci-fi or um, like kind of what's the word? Not like end times type of, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's like the world's falling apart type of show. The word escaping me, doesn't matter. But I watched it over the course of a week,
The
and
Rapture.
well, kind of like that, yeah.
Okay.
But it's like the world's about to end, and so the
Yeah.
premise is everyone there's like 10,000 people, and everyone lives in this like mile-long silo dug into the earth,
Okay.
and that's what it is. And then over the course of the show, you find out like people don't know why they live in the silo. People don't know why they can't go outside, except for there's like poison air, and so if you go outside, you die. And then, of course, as you imagine, because people don't know why they're in there, because there aren't
Hmm.
any records about it, a lot of theories start to emerge as to, well, why are we in here? Who is controlling us to stay in here?
Uh
So your
huh.
conversation, like this topic in general,
Yes.
and if you watch the show, there's tons of conspiracies, and then as the course of the show goes on, you find that some of them aren't true, and some of them are kind of true.
Uh huh.
Um, so I think given your enjoyment of conspiracy theories, you might like this like apocalyptic sci-fi type of show.
Yes. Which makes me think, um, is the same mechanism at play with religious faith?
What do you mean?
Well, like you could argue that having faith reduces your existential angst.
Yeah,
I'm going to die. I don't know when I'm going to die. I don't want to die. I have no control over when I die. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an outcome that, something that I know where I go. I go to heaven. My life means something because I'm going to heaven. The way I live my life will influence what heaven's like, where I go. We create this. uh, I'm Catholic. I'm just like intellectually think about, like, we have a kind of created a structure for what our life
sure.
looks like, and we've brought order to complete ambiguity and chaos,
I think that's the
which is
common
kind
through
of what
line, right?
right is kind of what the conspiracy theorists are also doing. The difference is that religion is universally accepted,
It's sanctioned.
where
Yeah.
it's sanctioned, right? And so we don't. It's less fringe, but I wonder if we're kind of operating the same way when we align with our faith.
Yeah, I've heard people talk about religion before, and this this premise of like God of the gaps. So, you know, thousands of years ago, there was polytheistic religions, and those still exist today, like Hinduism. But there are polytheistic religions that thought that different gods did different things, like the ancient Greeks, ancient Romans, um, ancient Native Americans. Right? There was a rain god, there was a sun god, there was all these different types of gods,
Hmm.
and that
Hmm.
was because people didn't know why it rained. People didn't know why the sun came out every day. People didn't know those things.
Hmm.
And over time, as people started to understand more, all right, this isn't a god who's doing this. We kind of better understand, well, this is because the earth rotates. This is because there's
Yeah.
a climate. Well,
Yeah.
we don't think about these individual gods as much anymore. Now there is, all right, we understand. So now there is a god, some more monotheistic type of
Uh huh.
religions.
Uh huh.
So it's less about natural
Yep.
phenomena, and it's more about that theoretical, psychological, spiritual type of phenomena that we're kind of less comfortable with because it's very ambiguous.
Hmm.
And then you
Hmm.
go over time, we understand more about how people's brains function, their need for understanding and things like that. And
Hmm.
some will say that the rise in lack of religiosity is in part because there is an increased understanding of our processes in our brains. And as
Yeah.
I hear you say all this, it does make me think that, right, we live in a time where there's never been more information, but we live in
Yep.
a time where there's never been more information, and most of it you can
Yeah.
find is incorrect, or at least is just an assumption or a
Hmm.
perspective. It's not an actual fact.
Yeah.
So I think that there is some connection there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
There's a psychologist that I interviewed a while ago, Matthias Desmet, uh, and he is University of Ghent, and he wrote a book, and he was specifically talking about the not so much that we have abandoned faith in favor of science like it's a good thing, but that we've really just swapped the thing that reduces our anxiety. Like his argument is, yes, a religion, the Catholic Church, for example, which was a sort of a pillar of thought. We've moved now to science, and we view that as kind of the prevailing. The most wisdom is related to
Yeah.
science now, but there's a lot of ambiguity in science, and yet we wholeheartedly believe in that, and that it's serving the same mechanism to reduce our anxiety.
Yeah. I
You know what I
mean,
mean? Like it's an interesting. I don't know. It's hard because there's in my mind. I think science. There's a lot more evidence, but his argument would be that there's not as much evidence as you think there is. We have to suspend belief frequently as it relates to science.
I would say that's particularly true of social sciences, like you and I,
Oh yeah.
where you and I come from, right? Is, you know, it's difficult to prove
Hmm.
a lot of what we do. Instead, we support
Right.
the findings
Yes.
support a theory. They don't prove a theory.
Yes.
Whereas in hard sciences, yeah, there is proof that
Yes.
you can find over time, right? It's not, it's like, what do they say now? It's not the theory of gravity, it's the law of gravity. Like gravity
Uh huh.
exists is no longer a theory, at least on
Yep.
Earth.
Yep.
Um, but when you're talking about people and psychological mechanisms, there's
Hmm.
it's so complex and can be so different depending upon the culture of the individual that it's difficult to have the law of this.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
when you were talking about it, it does, again, I think the through line here is maybe some people do move from that more religious affiliation to a scientific affiliation, but what they're looking for is still an affiliation.
Yeah. Right.
So
It's the
if
same.
I'm was religious and now I'm not, I need to find
Hmm.
another community. I That's still important for me. So where
Yep.
is that community going to come from?
Yep.
It may not be as structured as my my religion was, but I may go find another community that where I share values and I feel like I can freely talk and things like that, which are
Hmm.
important. And I think, you know, going full circle when we were talking about, people who might be more likely to believe in conspiracy theories, I bet that community is pretty important to them too.
Yeah. Strong. Yeah. Well, good. Okay, so I'm not sure if I've totally convinced you to question everything. I'm concerned that you're not all on board with my conspiracies.
I think you have just convinced me to lean in further to my conversation belief, which is there's a reason people like you believe in conspiracy theories, which is, you just need a friend, Dave. You need more friends.
That
You need people that want to affiliate with you. So yes, Dave, you have friends. I'll be your friend.
I
I
will
think
say
it just is it's a shriek for help.
I'm disappointed to admit, um, that after I was getting ready for this podcast and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna be loaded for bear." And then even just doing the research on it, you're a little bit like, "Oh, I understand why it's appealing." And I've sort of convinced myself to be less into the conspiracy theories just from doing the research. That's my truth. That is my truth. My sad,
Right.
embarrassing truth
Right.
is like, well, okay, um, but they're not all wrong. I just want to end by saying they're not all wrong. Gotta look into it. Okay.
Well, I would agree. I would agree. And I would
Hmm.
say I would differentiate between like a conspiracy theory and someone who's just critical. Like I find myself to be someone who's more critical. Like I hear something or I say something like this,
Uh huh. Uh huh.
and I'm like, I don't know. Let me
Yeah.
dig into that. Let me try to understand where you're coming from and why it doesn't make sense to me or it does make sense to me. So I
Hmm.
think that there is probably on that spectrum of people who are very rule following and don't want to engage in anything at all. And then there's, maybe where I see myself as not conspiracy theorist, but sometimes critical of
Yeah.
and maybe discerning about, well, what's going on here.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then maybe you kind of go to those different levels of conspiracy theory after. So I think it is more
Yeah.
of a spectrum. And I would
Yeah.
say it can be important to be critical
Right. Right.
and discerning, not just
Yes.
be
Yeah. From a personality standpoint, this I wonder I think it requires good kind of cognitive agility or conceptual fluency, we would call it, to be in between, like to be an ardent believer in everything the authority says, or to be an ardent believer in everything that is opposite of what it doesn't require
yeah,
much thought. You're just
right.
staying there. But to be in between requires more intellectual heft or more intellectual work to to cope with the ambiguity there, right? You
Yeah,
think?
right. Cause yeah, it's certainly not as easy to do that,
Mhm.
to do it
Yeah.
effectively at least. And to your point, it can be easier for some people to do that than others, right? If you feel like you have a community, if you are not someone who can get kind of anxious and just is needs more, maybe more that support, that certainty, that control, whatever it might be. There's, I'm sure, a number of reasons why people may find comfort
Yeah.
in different types of conspiracies.
Yeah. Well, good. All right, I feel like we've ironed this out, Rob. We've solved the world's problems in this area.
I think for all of your comments up front that you are going to convince me. I think the final thought of this episode should be you just convinced yourself that I was right.
Yeah. It's a little bit that is a little bit of what happened. I mean,
I
yeah.
think I think that's what happened. I think that's what happened. But I would ask everyone who is listening or watching to in the comments or via email to send us your questions. What do you think about conspiracy theories? I would be interested to know what you said. What I'm a blue pill person. Is that what
Yeah,
you
Rob's
said?
Rob's blue
A
pill.
blue pill. All
Mhm.
right. So for all the red pill people, what did we miss about conspiracy theories? What didn't we talk about? Or for people who find this interesting or who tend to be a bit more conspiracy theorists, I'd like to better understand from you all why.
Mhm.
What about conspiracy theories engages you? Why do you get excited about it?
Yep.
And Dave, our email address is
So for email is shrinkspacepodcast.com or at Gmail. And then all of our social media is shrinkspace show, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of those things. So you can reach out to us
perfect.
there. And then to help boost this channel, subscribe,
What
subscribe,
what
subscribe.
what are you doing?
Rob, this is subliminal messaging. Okay, just everybody, they're gonna be annoyed, like, oh, what is that? Stupid. Subscribe. I don't get it. But MK Ultra baby, that just got in. They're not gonna be able to stop themselves from hitting the like button and subscribing. Okay, it's mind
They're going to be
control.
talking about you some way, one way or another, Dave. Creepily, creepily whispering into a microphone. My God.
All right. Good
All
talking
right,
with you.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
See ya.